Good morning. This morning I thought I would share with you a little bit of my morning work. Our kids have morning work as they do their homeschooling. They're over here now writing cards. One of the things we're trying to do to kind of reach out to some of our friends and family and neighbors that might have their day brightened a little bit by a handwritten card by a 7 or 9 year old. So every day we're trying to have them write a card. One of the things I'm trying to do is make a little bread every day. So this is the bread I made yesterday. I tried my hand at a couple baguettes type breads. They came out really good. I am by no means a professional baker. I enjoyed making this sourdough bread. I think I do a relatively good job at it. It's not nearly consistent enough to have it be like a professional recipe, but it comes out pretty well every day. Generally, this is naturally leavened bread, so I let the sourdough do its thing. It takes me about 30 hours to make a loaf of bread, but it's very passive time. There's only a few different active moments in it. And the cool thing is the next morning I have bread started and I can make whatever I want out of it. So one of the things I hope to show, as hopefully we're not here in our homes too long, but each day shows some of the things. I've made some boules, and we've made cinnamon rolls, and made flatbreads, and focaccia type bread, and things like that. But I wanted to show you how I do it. So first thing I want to show you is my sourdough starter. So this was a gift about 10 years ago, so I've kept it alive since then, which is very impressive. But you can see how bubbly it is. So I'm going to go ahead and stir this, and it's going to lose a lot of its volume. But that's telling me that this is nice and healthy. So the first thing I'm going to do to make a new batch of bread is, those of you that know me know that whenever I'm baking, I always weigh everything. So I'm going to use my scale. I'm going to add 8.5 ounces of my fed sourdough starter. Perfect. 8.5 ounces of fed sourdough starter. Then to that, I'm going to tare my scale. So tearing just means that we're zeroing it. So it goes back to 0. I'm going to pour in 12 ounces of room temperature to just barely warm water. There we go, 12 ounces. And I'm going to use this same fork, just kind of scrape it off. And I'm going to mix this together. You can kind of take a look at that. So now it's still kind of stringy, but I just want to dissolve it a little bit before we add our flour. So at this point, we're only going to add half of the flour. Actually, we're going to add about 3/5 of the flour we're going to use. Then we're going to let that sourdough in there take its time and just have a little buffet, start hanging out and eating all the flour that we put in there. That's going to develop the yeast, which is going to help give us a rise in the final bread. So to this, I want to zero my scale again. I'm going to add 12 3/4 ounces of flour. So if you're interested in trying to make this at home and you don't have a sourdough starter, there are lots of recipes out there for making one. You can make a natural one where literally you just mix flour and water and leave it on the counter. It'll slowly, it takes quite a bit of time, but it'll slowly absorb yeast from the air, or the yeast from the air will land on it, and you'll actually make your own sourdough starter. You can also speed it up a little bit by adding some yeast, but look around for a recipe online, there's plenty of them. So now, I'm going to mix this together, and you'll see that this is going to make almost like a batter consistency. So that's it. That's all we're looking for here. I'm going to scrape down the sides, scrape off my fork. So I'm going to wrap this and then leave this out for, I don't know, until I go to bed. Our house is relatively cold. If you ask my wife, it's way too cold. But so it takes a little bit of time for this to get really active. So I'm going to give it some more time, but I'll usually stick it in the fridge before I go to bed. All right, the next important thing is I need to come back here. I'm going to put this whole crock on, zero it. So I just took 8.5 ounces out of this. So I need to replace 8.5 ounces. So this is still a little less than half full. So this is live active sourdough in there, which once I add more flour and more water, the flour is going to start to get eaten by the yeast. that's alive in here so that tomorrow I can make more bread. So to this, I'm going to add 4.5 ounces of water or so. And I like to just give that a quick stir. And then to that, I'm going to add about 4 ounces of flour. So now I'll go ahead and mix this together, and the cool thing is you know if this is really active because as it sits there during the day, and then I find this happens a lot during the summer when it's much warmer out, but you can see the level in there right now, it'll actually rise up to the top as that yeast gets very active, and then it kind of gets a little sleepy again after it's eaten. It's kind of like me going to a buffet. So I get really active, hit that buffet really hard, and then after that kind of slow down, and then it's nap time. All right, so the third step I do is I make today's bread. So this is what I started yesterday. So this here that we just made becomes this. So this sat out all day, sat in the refrigerator overnight. Now you can see this too has a lot of air bubbles in there. So to this, I'm not adding any more liquid to it, but I'm going to put it on my scale, tare it. Now it doesn't matter if you leave your fork in there, as long as you're aware that you left your fork in there. Don't take it out now because your weight will be all wrong. So to this now, I'm going to grab and add 8.5 ounces of flour. So now we added our 8.5 ounces of flour. I'm going to add a tablespoon of salt. Salt is something that I think is super important in sourdough bread. I think you really need that salt to help bring out the sourness of it. And then I'm going to put in a tablespoon of sugar. So my tablespoon of sugar, my tablespoon of salt. So that sugar is there, that's like pure energy for this yeast to eat. The salt is there to add flavor, but it also slows down the growth of the yeast a little bit. Now I'm going to turn this into my dough for the day. So I usually just kind of mix the salt and sugar together a little bit. Then I'll start with my hand, I'll start folding the flour in. So this is going to be a little part of your workout, but this is not at all like kneading bread on a mixer. All I'm looking to do is to get all this flour to get absorbed by this mass that we made yesterday. And it should, if I did all my measurements correct, should make a relatively soft dough, but that will hold on to all this and not be super sticky. Okay, so now once I've got most of my flour incorporated, I just keep kind of folding it over on itself, trying to soak up whatever flour is in there. Now I'm going to take my dough and just kind of form it, and I'm stretching the skin on the outside and kind of pinching the bottom. And what that's going to do, that's just going to help have this smooth layer on top that's going to help collect gas. The gas in here is carbon dioxide, so the yeast gives off carbon dioxide as it grows, as it eats, and that's what's going to make our bread rise. So I'm going to wrap this, stick this on a counter or in one of the warmest places around on top of the refrigerator, sometimes a good spot, until it almost doubles in size. Depending on the temperature of your house, depending on how vigorous your starter is, that could take 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, but I'm not going anywhere. I've got plenty of time to keep my eye on it. At that point, I will cut it into 2 if I'm going to make these, and then I shape them into baguettes. Let those rise a little bit and bake them. If I'm going to do a big loaf, same thing. You'll let it rise a little bit. Once again, it could be a couple hours, and then go ahead and bake it. I baked these at 425 degrees for about 20 minutes. I turned that into a round shape. I cooked them for about 28 minutes or so. And the absolute most important thing about sourdough is to never name your starter. Every sourdough starter I've ever named, my good friend Max and Sam, and I forget some of the others, they die. This I've had for over 10 years and I've never named it. So to me, that seems to be the most important thing in making sourdough. Hopefully you found this interesting. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll show you some more stuff we're cooking pretty soon.